Microplastics. How are they affecting your health and to what extent? Let's find out. And welcome to the Exam Room Podcast, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I'm the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching and downloading in more than 150 countries around the world and making the Exam Room one of the most consumed nutrition podcasts anywhere on the planet today. And there is literally not a single country in the entire world that is not affected by what it is we're going to be talking about today. You may have heard about microplastics. Well, what are they? And how are they affecting your health? Dr. Hana Kahleova, our lead researcher here at the Physicians Committee, is here to tell us all about it. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Kahleova.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Always a pleasure. We usually talk about nutrition, so this is a little bit of a departure, but when you said, hey, let's talk about microplastics, I was like, absolutely. Because honest to goodness, true story, I was just up in New York spending some time with my dad, and he wanted to talk about I was there for a week. And I can only think of maybe one day where this didn't come up in conversation. Like, he is terrified of these microplastics. How scared should we be?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, let me ask you, Chuck, how much plastic would you like to have in your brain?
If at all possible, none. It just doesn't seem like that's a good place for things.
Well, good call. But I mean, I'm talking about enough microplastics to make up a plastic spoon.
Well, hold that up for the camera there.
Yeah.
That's how much plastic is in your brain?
Well, you know, let me show you some research. A group of researchers at the University of New Mexico, they analyzed 24 human brains of autopsies of deceased people, and they found that the average brain contained about 7 grams of plastic, which that's about how much it takes to make up a disposable spoon. And it gets even scarier. The brain microplastic content was higher than in the liver and in the kidneys. And they also looked at the composition. The most prevalent plastic was polyethylene, which is used in most of the
food containers,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Food containers and packaging.
Yeah.
And it was followed by polypropylene and polyvinyl chloride. And more kinds were also found, but these were the 3 major ones. And the content of microplastics was also increasing over time because they took people who deceased like at different time frames.
Yeah.
And there was a clear increase over time in the microplastic concentration in the brain. And what was fascinating, that people who had dementia had even higher concentrations of microplastics in their brain compared with healthy people.
Wow. Wow.
Of course, we cannot say if the microplastics caused the dementia. There's a correlation, but it doesn't mean causation.
No, but I would speculate, we talk about those amyloid plaques and the blockages in the brain. I would imagine plastic would get in there and it would gum things up pretty well too. So again, you just said, we can't say for certain,
right,
but it makes sense on the surface.
And what's fascinating is that, this is polarization wave microscopy that can detect the microplastics. And they found that the microplastics were found around those areas where the immune cells were collecting. The immune cells were probably trying to get rid of those.
Yeah.
And also around the vascular walls. And that's another great topic. Can microplastics be in our veins, in our arteries? Can they become, like a part of the plaque in the arteries? So another study looked at microplastics in the arteries and the risk of heart attack, stroke, or dying from any cause. And they took 304 patients undergoing end arterectomy. So there are carotid arteries on your neck that are important for your brain. They bring the blood to your brain. If there's too much plaque then your physician may suggest this particular surgery where they just remove the plaque from the carotid arteries. So they took 304 of these people who just were undergoing this surgery, and they followed them for about 3 years. And they found that more than half of these patients had microplastics in their plaques. So, you see...
And that's what we're seeing here on the screen?
This is under the microscope, what they saw in more than half of their patients. And what was really fascinating, these people who had microplastics in their plaques, in their arteries, they had a 4.5 higher risk of a heart attack, or stroke, or dying from any cause.
Tack on.
4.5 higher risk, that's significant, right?
That is. That is very significant.
So as we mentioned, we cannot really say that the microplastics caused them to die sooner. But there's something about these microplastics.
It makes me wonder, so like the kind of foods that come packaged in these plastics, I mean, a lot of times they're the ultra-processed foods that we talk about that aren't the healthiest things in the world. Think of like a Hot Pocket, just put it in the microwave, that's still in the plastic wrapper, heat it up that way, right? And so I'm wondering, is that kind of how it's leaching in there? Are you more likely to consume microplastics with an unhealthy diet than you would a whole food diet where you're washing and prepping and doing all of, the cooking from scratch? Seems to make sense that you could at least make that leap. I don't know. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. This is a great question. And I mean, some of the microplastics get into your body through the packaging on the foods, but some of it may be contained in the foods that you're eating. So let me explain. When you look at some pictures from our oceans, you see so much plastic, right? And fish sometimes just consume the plastic. We know that the microplastic concentration in the oceans are just increasing, and they're being accumulated in the fish and in the seafood. And if you're thinking that Alaska is just like, removed from this problem, I have some bad news for you, because a group of researchers analyzed all the samples of water in Alaska, from the rivers, from the lakes, from the ocean. They found microplastics in each single sample. So even Alaska is, not the answer. When you consider that the ocean is a major source of microplastics, that raises the question, what's the concentration in seafood and in fish? Can we consume some of the microplastics there? So there are a few studies looking at this, and they found like significant amounts of microplastics in seafood. 90 microplastic particles per 100 grams, which would be, one portion in seafood. And then when we look at fish, it was roughly 240 milligrams per 100 grams of fish, which makes up half a straw. The straw that you're using for drinks. So you would eat half of the straw with a serving of fish.
So, and these are all wild-caught fish, correct, that we're talking about here?
They were different. These were different studies looking at different samples of fish, and there's like a range, but I'm picking a number that would be kind of representative of fish in general. Yeah,
there's part of me, though, is wondering, like, would those numbers be less if it were farm-raised? Like, it's hard to say, and that brings in a whole host of other, like, problems, by the way. But I'm just wondering, these must be wild-caught. I don't honestly, I don't know. That's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
But I would think that the levels would be different if they were farm raised and not necessarily exposed to the plastics that are in the oceans and the rivers.
Absolutely. So the number one recommendation, if you want to limit your exposure to microplastics, don't eat fish and seafood.
Wow.
I mean, you know, we're getting there where the pollution of the environment is so significant that, people used to think that fish would be the healthiest option. But, it brings a lot of other considerations.
Absolutely. Wow, that's wild.
And just for comparison, we know that microplastics are also in the soil, in the air. We cannot completely avoid them.
Right.
So just for comparison, they looked at microplastics in fruits and veggies, and the average concentration was 1 to 3 microplastics per 100 grams. So we're talking about 90 microplastics in seafood per 100 grams, and 1 to 3, per 100 grams in fruits and veggies. The concentrations can increase, like if you wrap it up, in plastics and you don't wash it, of course you can increase the microplastic concentration. But generally speaking, the fruits and veggies were low in microplastics.
So at most 1/30th of the amount that's in 1/30th. Wow.
Some studies looked at, different kinds of fruits and veggies. They found that some apples and carrots that were wrapped up in plastic, they had higher concentrations, but nothing like the seafood or the fish.
Yeah.
So number 1 is not eating any seafood or fish. Number 2 are the containers and the packaging.
There we go.
Especially when the plastic container comes in contact with hot food. Think about a takeout.
Yeah.
And some of the restaurants use compostable materials, but still, many of them still use plastic. And especially the black plastic is from recycled electronics. And it's been suggested, that it may be linked to cancer. We don't know for sure, but definitely when a plastic container comes in contact with hot food, like microwaving your food in a plastic container is a hard no.
Hard no. Just
absolutely.
Don't do it. Do not do it.
And the takeout, be careful with it. Like if you're dining in, then it's different, because if you're taking some leftovers in the container, by the time you're done eating, they're probably like pretty cold. Not a concern. But with the hot food in the containers, it's an issue. And the same goes for drinks. Hot drinks in these cups that are lined with plastic. I mean, that plastic will be leaching into your drink.
Well, that's virtually every coffee cup that's being sold. And so now here's where I get paranoid is I remember, gosh, this must have been last year. I went to a very popular coffee shop, the one with the green logo. I went there and I ordered a iced Americano, but they have to brew the espresso first. And they brewed it literally in the same plastic cup that they were just going to dump the ice in. And I remember thinking, like, one, that's going to really affect the flavor, but two, there's going to be some plastic leaching into this. Like, just was not feeling good about that cup of coffee at all. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a concern even about the cold drinks, because if you're thinking that the cans are just aluminum, no, they're coated with plastic inside.
Dagger.
So that will be a smaller concern than with the hot drinks, because it's really the heat that will release the microplastics.
Yeah.
And the same goes with water. Some people are like, we cannot even have a bottle of water. When you're traveling, you probably need some bottled water. And as long as it's stored as it's supposed to be, like in the right temperature, there's no concern. But, if you leave it in your car in the direct sun, I mean, you can even smell and taste the plastic.
Absolutely.
So don't do it,
Another hard no.
Whenever you can, just use glass.
Okay.
Use stainless steel. Use the materials that are safe and that don't contain.
And if you're buying a drink, try to find one that's in the glass bottle. not always
Right.
the easiest to do,
Right.
especially with water. I can
Yeah.
only think of a few brands that are actually sold.
That's right.
And you got to pay like way more money for the
Yeah.
glass bottle one.
Yeah.
Although
And
Voss
it's
and Saratoga,
heavier,
it is, but
it's
man,
a pain.
free plug, that Saratoga water is smooth.
Mm.
It is really good. It comes in the blue bottle. Man, that is a good bottle of water.
Yeah.
Freaking $5 though, man. Forget that.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
And one more source of exposure that I'd like to mention is also our clothes.
Uh-oh.
Some of the clothes are made from synthetic materials such as polyester and nylon and acrylic. And just imagine you sweating in the gym in this t-shirt, and some of it will probably be absorbed through your skin. So if you can, use cotton, especially for those workouts when you're sweating.
All right. Cotton breathes better anyway. That's cotton shirts. That's what I wear. Nice and comfortable. They breathe well.
So until now, we've just played defense. We've discussed how to limit the exposure of microplastics.
Right.
But I have some encouragement.
What you
A
got?
few studies actually suggest that plants have the power to help us, help our body, get rid of those microplastics. So let me show you one experiment. In one lab experiment, they took the complex carbohydrates that are in plants that contain a lot of fiber, and these complex carbohydrates contain fiber. They're highly efficient and non-toxic, and the researchers tested whether they could remove the microplastics in water. So they took multiple samples of groundwater, and they measured the content of the microplastics, and then they took two plants, fenugreek and okra. So fenugreek is an herb native to the Mediterranean region, and
Never even heard of it.
yeah,
Okay.
well, it's an herb, and so some people like the taste. Some people say it tastes like maple syrup. So it's being used as an herb, but also in traditional medicine. And in the lab experiment, the researchers just took all the samples of groundwater and put the complex carbohydrates extracted from fenugreek into the water. And guess what happened in only 30 to 60 minutes? The fenugreek complex carbohydrates were able to remove 89% of the microplastics from the water.
What?
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah. So, some people are just afraid of the carbs. Carbs, no, I cannot eat carbs. Carbs are good for you, and especially, with the microplastics in mind. And when we look at okra, so, the complex carbohydrates found in okra, they removed about 80% of the microplastics.
Same thing,
So-
just removed it right from the water.
Exactly. We need to be careful with this experiment because it's just looking at the water. You know, it's not done like in people.
Right. I was wondering how that would translate to like human consumption. Would we still see the same benefit, and to what extent? Like,
But you would limit your consumption, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you put fenugreek or okra in your water, then you limit your consumption.
That's
But
pretty
you
good.
don't, my guess is that you don't need to use these specific plants. It's just illustrating the benefits of complex carbohydrates in plants.
Yeah, but okra tastes good.
Yeah.
I'm a Southern boy. Like I do enjoy a good okra.
Exactly. So
That's good stuff right there.
It's not only the complex carbohydrates. There are more compounds in plants that can be protective. One of them is the anthocyanins. These are the plant pigments in the dark red and purple fruits and veggies.
Bring on the berries.
Yeah, all the berries and cherries, like the best. I mean, for me, it's best tasting anyway.
yeah.
So why
Oh,
not?
yeah.
Why not eat it?
Absolutely.
And one study actually showed that these anthocyanins are able to block the microplastics from being attached to the receptors for in the reproductive organs for the sex hormone receptors.
Wow.
You know, they found microplastics even in reproductive organs, in the placenta, in breast milk. And that raises the question, what about the next generation? Will they be all plastic? Well, the anthocyanins are able to block the microplastics from being attached to those receptors.
So this to me actually seems more promising than the previous study, because we're talking about actual consumption here.
Yeah.
So now we have that plant proof. So that's pretty cool. Shout out, Simon. That's pretty cool. I like that. And I happen to enjoy berries, and I eat berries every single day. I'm feeling better about things.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a lot better about things. Thank you.
So we've discussed how to limit the consumption of microplastics, but also about the protective power of plants. And I hope we will not end up like the people in the picture.
Oh, no. They are 100% plastic, aren't they? That poor family. At least it's the pretty shades of colors there, but whatever. Daggone. That gives us a lot to think about. Thank you, Dr. Kahleova. Interesting. I always like them when you put your slide presentations together. Man. So we have switched at home from plastic Tupperware to glass, which I feel pretty good about. There may or may not be a plastic water bottle right underneath me here at this table, which, I mean, I'm not feeling great about, but not as bad. I don't think it's been sitting out in the sun. I can't say what happened before I bought it, though. You know, what about your kitchen? Like, well, what's it looking like? Are we transitioning over to glass containers? Or
Absolutely,
where
all glass containers. And I wanted to mention that even the lids that are plastic, don't fill the containers all the way so that your food doesn't come in contact with the plastic. You know, like just use a bigger container and leave some space between the lid and the food. That's number one.
Good tip.
Number two is also your Vitamix. If you're blending hot food, you know, that may that may also be a source of microplastics. So recently I bought a stainless steel container for the Vitamix. It's $200, you know, and I believe it's a good investment in your health.
What? They have a stainless steel for the Vitamix?
You just find it on Amazon. It's $200.
Wow.
I'm using it. I'm using Vitamix every single day, and I oftentimes use it for hot foods.
Right.
So I just invested in this one.
All right. What's your go-to Vitamix recipe? I know that's off topic, but if you're using it every day, I'm sure you've got like your favorite that you go to.
I make my smoothies in there. Another of my favorites is a pumpkin soup. So yeah, I just cook pieces of pumpkin and I blend it in the Vitamix until it's smooth. Oh, it's so good. And some fresh garlic and some salt. Ooh, it's so good.
Dr. Kahleova's Kitchen. I'm smelling a new segment. Yeah, what do you think? Dr. Kahleova's Kitchen. That's got a ring to it, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
Eating for health. I like it. All right, microplastics. So the big takeaway here is we can make a lot of changes. We got to be careful, but we're not necessarily doomed. I think that what you showed was really important in that, you know, there's ways that we can limit our exposure, but more importantly, the foods that we choose to eat can actually help, you know, reduce that exposure as well. I think that that's critical. Shocker,
Absolutely.
It's plants, right?
Yeah.
I would have thought like it wasn't necessarily the carbs that would have been the filter, but fiber. I feel like fiber kind of is like this magical nutrient. So we'll let fiber stay over there, but we'll give a win for the carbs today.
Fiber is a part of the magic of the complex carbohydrates.
I got you. But you know, we'll let fiber have another day. We'll have it. But anyway, very cool. Dr. Kahleova, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.